morning and welcome to Monday Medicine, the pastor's prescription for your problems. And this is Pastor Richard LeJeune.
And this is the great doctor, Curtis King. How are you, my friend? Good morning.
I've never been called the great doctor before. I never have. So
I call you anytime I have medical problems. You always seem to have, you have a word of prayer for me, and I mean,
Jesus was the great physician.
Yes.
I don't know if I ought to be called the great doctor. That's just a little too close.
We'll call you the average doctor. How about that?
There
Does that
you
work
go.
better?
Yeah. The good doctor. How's that?
The good doctor.
But my doctorate was honorary. So, so I don't think you can count that.
Well, you have never wanted that put on any church sign anywhere you've been.
No. And I've anytime that I have a chance to make sure people know it is honorary. In fact, most people don't even know that I was even given that, but whatever. I'm gonna have my master's degree in about a year.
Oh, wow. Check you out.
I'm getting close. Yeah. Just this morning, I finished a class, which is class number 8 in my master's. And I still have my class project to do. It's a 15 to 20 page project, but honestly, that's going to be really easy. It's probably going to be the easiest class project I've done, but I'm really enjoying doing this. I am not kidding you.
I have heard the smarter you get, the less hair you have.
Yes, so, that is true.
If that's the case, you're just a little bit smarter than me. So,
well, I think I have more hair here than I ever had here.
I've seen pictures of you when you were younger. So you used to have a head full of hair.
Oh my goodness!
I remember I came home from college my freshman year, and at the time I was a member of Rosedale Baptist Church in Baltimore. And when you're 18 and you come home from your freshman year of college, you want to make a good impression on your home pastor. And I'm standing downstairs. I could take it to the spot where I was staying. I'm standing downstairs in the school basement, and Pastor Toole comes around the corner, and the very first thing he says to me is he says, "You're losing your hair. I see a receding hairline there."
Oh no!
18 years old.
I gotta say this, coming from Scott Toole, that man is blessed with his hair.
Follically blessed.
He's got good hair. He's got really good hair.
He's got good hair. He's not quite as suave as Joel Osteen, but he's pretty close.
My hair is thin, okay? Obviously. Actually, my hair is no longer thin. My hair is gone, but before it was gone, it was thin.
Yeah.
But Alyssa has the thickest hair in the King family.
Okay.
And Nathan's hair, her husband, is thicker than hers. And I'm telling you, man, Silas, that man, it's going to be out of control when he gets older. So
yeah, he's got Esau type hair, huh?
Yep, thick hair.
Yeah,
yep.
Good.
I have just embraced it.
Is a good head of hair required to be hired on the pastoral staff of Lancaster Baptist? No, because Pastor Chappell doesn't. He's in our camp. So I answered my own question.
Pastor Chappell, I love Pastor Chappell. I do. Okay, I do. And I have great respect for him. He has been so good to Nathan. And so, but having said that, right now he looks better than he has in a long time. When I first started going out there for different things, one of the first things I noticed was that he had good hair when he was younger. He has, basically this now, but he was not balding gracefully. Okay. And he was in an in-between stage where I can't believe we're talking about him right now like this for all the world to see. But that I didn't go around talking that way, but I thought it. And then next thing you know, my balding stopped being graceful. And I probably went about 8 or 10 years where my hair was just horribly, embarrassingly awkward. And that's why I decided, you know what, I'm taking the clippers to it.
Just
it's
shave
gone.
it all off. There you
It's
go.
gone. And I'm a free man. So I think Pastor Chapel looks great now. And I'm not just saying that to remain on his good side. I really do.
Well,
Can we
this
delete
is
that for
no,
scratch
no. It's
that?
staying. This is evidence that God does not need good looks in order to achieve great things in His kingdom. He uses the simple to confound the wise, and he uses the I'm trying to pick a word that's kinder than ugly. He uses the challenged in
Yeah.
order to confound the less challenged. So
Well, I know we probably need to keep this moving here, but I'll just say this, that Pastor Chapel made it past that awkward stage, the awkward balding. But boy, you look at Mark Rasmussen out there, that man's got good hair.
yes, he does.
I mean, that man's got really good hair. So the future of West Coast, people like Nathan's got good hair. Man, they've got good hair coming up, and coming up along the way here. So
There's a verse that comes to mind as we talk about all this.
is there really?
Yes. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher.
There you go. There you go. We better get into the jokes of the day, or
please
you and I
share.
are going to lose every friend we've got.
That's right. Please share. Man,
you go first.
Okay. All right. Here we go. So someone broke into my garage the other day, and of all of the things they could have stolen, they stole my limbo stick. I mean, really, how low can you go?
You told me before we started it was going to be corny. That was actually funny. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, here, I'll take my turn. All right. So there was a mother mouse and a baby mouse, and they were living in the wall inside a home. And one day they ventured out into the kitchen to try to find something to eat, and they turned around, and there was the house cat. And the baby mouse was scared to death, and just began to just shake. But the mother mouse, walked right over to the cat and said, "Bark, bark, bark." And the cat got bug-eyed, turned around, and ran away. And the baby mouse looked at his mom and thought, "How in the world did you do that?" And the mom mouse said, "Now that is why you need to learn a foreign language." I got a feel this is going to be very close today.
There's a lot of truth in that joke.
Yeah.
I told my daughter yesterday, we went into the store together, and I said, let's just speak Spanish the whole time we're in here to each other. And she said, why? And I said, oh, I don't know. I need to make sure I stay up on my Spanish. And that wasn't really the reason. People look at us like we're crazy when we're speaking Spanish. So here I am in, an Orioles shirt, Orioles cap. I look about as white boy as possible. I'm with my daughter, who doesn't look Hispanic when she's with me, and we're speaking Spanish to each other. People are looking at us like, what is
where are they from
on here? So I do it just for the entertainment value. So
I think that's hilarious. Well, everywhere I go, I speak my primary language, and that's hillbilly.
Yes.
And I get looks all the time. I love it when people say, "Where are you from?" And I always say, "New Hampshire."
The hills of New Hampshire.
The hills of New Hampshire. That's right. Hey, we better get religious here. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Last week we talked about the cocoon, and how that sometimes it does feel like God has stuffed you in a hole and forgotten about you. We gave several examples. This whole topic is based on Noah and his family being stuffed into the ark and cocooned in there for over a year. The storm was 40 days and 40 nights, but they were in the ark for 378 days. But I gave a few other examples of people being cocooned. We talked about Moses being on the backside of the desert for 40 years. That's a very
Yes.
long cocoon,
That's a long
but
cocoon.
it is. And I'm sure that there were times that he was so glad he was out of the public eye, like he was in Egypt. But there were probably times of incredible loneliness back there. We talked about Paul being in Arabia for 3.5 years or for 3 years. Um, and you got to think about that when we're talking about a brilliant, highly educated man who was incredibly well respected everywhere he went, could not go into town anywhere in Israel without being known. But yet now he is miles away from home for 3 years. What a cocoon, you know. I'm sure that in that 3 year span there were periods of loneliness and God, why am I here? Um, Moments he would have thought this was preparation. He probably would have thought, well, was I not prepared before I got here? I mean, he had the entire Pentateuch memorized if he was a Pharisee. So we talk about Israel and Egypt 430 years. We talk about Jesus in human flesh 30 years before his ministry began, 33 years before he actually accomplished what he came to do. Um, we talked about the example of a baby being in the womb of its mother, and I mentioned how that I have been told, and I believe this is true, that the word woman technically means a man with a womb. Okay, because woman is mankind, but it's that part of mankind that has a womb. And the whole point of a baby being in the womb for 9 months is that the baby has to have that gestation period to be prepared and ready. And you think about even the life of a baby, even that baby actually come out of the womb is not prepared for independent living for a long, long time. And it's God's design to be in a cocoon. But we don't like cocoons. They're uncomfortable. And so the main illustration we're using, we've been talking about the book of Genesis, the story of Noah. Last week we talked about the storm outside. That was number one. And how fearful it had to be inside the ark during that 40 days and 40 nights of storm and rainfall, a time that was unprecedented in the world at that time. And it had to be horrible. But I don't know if we said this last week, but I'll say it now. The only thing that would have been worse than being inside that ark would have been being outside of that ark. Neither option is good. Okay. Neither option is good, but being inside the ark was certainly better than being outside of the ark. And then we talked about the stench inside. When you've got 7 of every clean animal and 2 of every unclean animal um, inside that, plus your own family, I can't even begin to fathom what it smelled like in there. And sometimes the world that we live in just stinks. It just stinks. And sometimes God will on purpose put us in a stinky place because we have to be there. We have to be there. I think the statement that probably best summarized last Monday was what you thought was a painful prison was actually a pocket of preparation. And then we also said what you thought was a painful prison was also a pocket of protection. So if we're talking to somebody today who maybe you in your heart feel withdrawn because some horrible situation has come your way, and now you feel like you're just kind of stuffed in a hole, this could be God's protection over you that you have those feelings, and it could be God's preparation for you that you have those. So that brings us to number three, and I'm going to let you take over from here. The step outside, the step outside. So won't you take that one, point number three?
Yeah, before I get into number three, I wanted to add something to what you just said. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I can remember a time where my family and I were cocooned,
Yep.
and I was removed from church ministry really against my will. And we moved into a little tiny apartment inside a church building, And it was a painful experience. Um, it was our ark, right? And I look back on it now, and it was the time where God grew me personally. And I think I can speak for Angela as well. It grew both of us the most. It grew our marriage, it grew us individually. It was spiritually claustrophobic, it was physically claustrophobic. I went from full time Christian ministry to a minimum wage job, and I I was uncomfortable in every way. But it was necessary for me to be prepared for what God had in my future. And I also, what I want to add here, and I don't want to make this about me, but I want to make a larger application. My mindset going into it was not right, because instead of seeing that God was providing us a place to live and an income to pay the bills, I was seeing the tininess of the house. I was
Yeah.
seeing the lack of a paycheck, or the size of the paycheck being smaller. And I failed to realize that my bills were still being paid, God was still being good, I was still being protected, and I was being prepared. And so I would tell you that if you're in a cocoon right now, you're in a time where God is transition time, where you feel claustrophobic in some way. God is using this to prepare you. See the good in it. Don't just see the bad, and then you'll be ready. Okay. Now that's what I wanted to add to what you just said. Let's move on and talk about the step outside. So the ship has come to a rest at Ararat, Mount
Yep.
Ararat, and the birds have been sent out, right? And they've gotten the blessing from God to open the door to the ark. The cocoon period is over. And you and I may think of that as a time of celebration.
Yeah.
And I'm sure on some level there was some excitement to be finally getting out of this boat, but their world was about to totally change,
Yeah.
because as they step outside of this boat, they have no idea what they're in for. It had never rained prior. There were not 4 seasons prior. There were not drastic swings of cold and heat from what we understand. They're getting ready to step outside to a completely different world. In fact, Peter tells us in his epistle that there are 3 versions of planet Earth. And the first one was pre-flood. The second one is the one after the flood. And then the third one is yet to come. That'll be the millennial reign of Christ. So they're stepping into, it's like stepping out onto another planet.
Yeah.
This
Like
is a
walking onto the
fearful,
moon.
right? This is a fearful thing for them, and they don't know what they're getting themselves into. And I find, Pastor King, that a lot of times when people are living in a situation that's less than desirable and they get used to it, they don't want to leave it behind, because we love what we know, even if what we
Yep.
know isn't good.
Familiarity.
We love familiarity. And so they're stepping out of what's become familiar to them for the last year. I'm sure they had systems in place, but please don't miss what I'm about to say here. They had been cocooned so that they could fly on the other side of the ark. And had they sat in defeatism and not stepped outside and just said, well, you know what, we're going to live in the ark the rest of our lives, this is what we know, they would have never experienced all of the joys that came from stepping outside. So that step outside, I'm sure, was fearful, but it was a necessary one in order for them to succeed. And I would just challenge you, before I hand it back over to Pastor King here, I would just challenge you that when it's that time, don't be afraid to step out. Think about the bird that's flying for the first time, right? Mom's got to nudge it out of the nest. Sometimes God has a way of making us where we are uncomfortable, and then we have to fly. Pastor King, people are funny because they'll complain about their circumstances
Until they have an opportunity to get out.
And then they don't want to. Then they don't want to get out.
Yep. You are correct. It's kind of like a prisoner in jail that every day they wake up in their cell and they want out, they want out, they want out. And when their term is finally over and it's time for them to walk out that metal door and let it clang behind them, they don't know what to do sometimes. And oftentimes they'll go commit another crime just so they can get back in.
Yes.
Because there is a certain security. It's kind of like a college student who has been through kindergarten, grade school, junior high, high school, and college, And now it's graduation day. It's time to go get a job. And a lot of times there's that fear, that there's that reservation, and they don't want to step out and do that, because you can find security in that scary, stinky ark, in that cocoon. Something I wrote down on our notes here is that if Noah and his family had had the modern American mindset, they would have immediately sought therapy, medication, and counseling
That's
when that
right.
ark landed, because they have just gone through a year of torment. Okay, a year of torment. They would have gotten out of that ark and immediately thought, where can I find a therapist? Where can I find some medication? Where can I find something that will get my brain to stop thinking about what I have just endured? What it was, because it was, but we don't want to get out. And Richard, the personal example that you shared, I remember when you were going through that incredibly well. You and I had numerous conversations during that time, and I went through the same thing,
Hmm.
and and I think both of us had some reservations in stepping back out to. But boy, I'll tell you, when I moved here to Niagara Falls, I had reservations, I had fears. I did. But I look around now and I'm thinking, this is the coolest place. And I tell my wife all the time, I feel like we live in paradise, but moving all of our stuff up here was scary. It was just scary. So, point being, listen, folks, when it's your time to step out, step out. Some of y'all need to make some drastic decisions in your life, that you're not going to let fear, reservation, hesitation, you're not going to let trauma, you're not going to let the misdeeds of others in your past keep you from moving forward. um, Noah had a world to populate and till and work. All right. He don't have time to go back inside that ark and do his cocoon thing the rest of his life. Maybe there's a time to lick your wounds, okay? But there's also a time to get up and run. So when that ark door opened up, it was time to run. It was time to get busy. And uh, this is going to sound insensitive, but sitting around feeling sorry for yourself gets you nowhere. Sitting around pointing a finger of blame at whoever hurt you gets you nowhere. All
That's
it
right.
does is turns you into a bitter person. It turns you into an unproductive person, and you're going to spread your bitterness to a whole bunch of other people if you don't look at that open door to get out of the ark and go.
and
So,
and sitting around and talking about what happened in the good old days, doesn't help anything today either, right?
yeah, or the
And
bad old days.
or the bad old days. But people do
Yeah,
that. And we're lazy. And what we do is, in any situation, there's good and bad. But if there's more good than bad, we'll just forget the bad. And if there's more
yeah,
bad than good, we just forget the good. And we sit around and we talk about how things used to be. And we'll talk about how we got cocooned, or sidelined or pigeonholed, and how we don't want to, now we turn ourselves into a victim, and we don't want to get up and move forward for the Lord. And so it may be
yeah.
that your time of cocoon is over. It may be that that ark door has fallen open and you were just sitting there. Well, the encouragement is step outside, get up. And yes, it's fearful. It can be scary, but get up and keep putting one foot in front of the other and find that next chapter that God has for you in your life, and soar like the bird.
Amen. We all find some pleasure in playing the victim. Okay. And and I think we do that because we all have been the victim. We've all been hurt.
At
Okay.
some point.
Everybody has had somebody mistreat you, lie to you, cheat you, steal from you, betray you, whatever, whatever, whatever. Listen, you're not the only one. So, you can hide inside that ark the rest of your life if you want to, or you can get out and till the ground. Um, I'll tell you this: I pastor a church full of people who've been bulldozed over by life, and I'm thankful that I've seen so many of these folks that come here Sunday after Sunday that have stepped up to say, you know what, I'm moving forward with this.
Amen.
And I praise God for them. Hey, I've got 25 minutes. So we got 5 minutes and 2 more points. We'd already talked about extending this to next week. So why don't we go ahead and get into point 4? I really doubt we'll finish it.
Yeah,
okay.
we can at least start.
We can at least start it. By the way, chapter 8, verses 15 and 16 of Genesis were the step outside. And the stone stacking is point number 4. So we've seen the storm outside, the stench inside, the step outside, the stone stacking. That's from chapter 8, verse 20, where the Bible says, and Noah built an altar unto the Lord. Why don't you take that and talk about that for a minute?
So he didn't know, he didn't even have a house yet, right? They step outside the ark. They don't even have a place really to call home. I guess they could sleep in the ark until they got that built. But instead of building himself a house, instead he turns around and builds an altar unto the Lord. And that shows where his devotion was and where his priorities were. It was not his agenda and his comfort. It was serving the Lord that mattered first. He didn't even have. They didn't know about animal supply and how that was going to work. Right here, these animals no doubt there was some breeding that took place on the ark, I'm sure, and there was some little calves that may have been born, but they're taking the few animals they have and they're sacrificing those up to God, not really sure what this is going to do. You're talking about being in animals going into extinction. We're down to just a handful left in the entire world. Now, obviously, those animals have repopulated and filled the earth today, but that wasn't the case then. And the point we're trying to make here is that in your attempt to soar, in your attempt to thrive as you step out of the ark, you have to make sure that you put God at the forefront of everything you say and do. And it really is a point where we're talking about living by faith. And faith puts God first. Fear puts me first. Faith says, I'm going to seek first God's kingdom, Matthew 6:33. Fear says, I'm going to seek first my kingdom and then give the leftovers to the Lord. And they were guilty of this in the book. Is it Haggai, where they were building their own houses, and the prophet came along and said, look,
you got houses. What about
beautiful
the Lord?
homes, but the Lord's house is falling apart. And metaphorically, or rather in a broader sense, we have to make sure that our spiritual life is strong before we go worrying about these other things. And take time to build your altar privately and spend time with God. It's so vital. It's so important. If you're going to succeed on the backside of your cocoon, you're going to need to spend ample time privately with God in Bible reading and prayer.
Yeah. Thinking about Noah and his family, priority number 1 was stacking those stones up to build an altar. Okay. I'm reminded, you and I used to live in Maryland, and just the next state down was Virginia. I don't know did you ever go down to the Jamestown settlement in Virginia?
I never have done that.
Oh boy, that's something you got to do. Incredible. So there is the original site, okay, where the Jamestown settlement was. And there's always excavation going on, archaeological work. But just down the road, there's a rebuilt Jamestown settlement that looks like probably what the settlement actually did look like. But one thing I learned there was that when the residents of Jamestown arrived, before any of them built a house, the first thing they built was a church. And I thought, you know what, that speaks volumes of what meant or what was important to them. And listen, we all have houses to build. We all have things that have to be done. We all have bills to pay. I get that. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. You got to put the Lord in his place, in his proper top shelf place. And so Noah is an example of that. Hey, I believe our time is gone. And next week, we have one more point on this. And then we have some concluding thoughts. So we probably will finish this up next week. 10 seconds, concluding thought, Pastor Richard.
Keep the Lord first, and we'll see you next Monday. God bless you.